and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA, your LGBTQ news show. I'm Andy Hum.
And in case you've just switched over from Fox News, I am neither Aretha Franklin nor Ann Northrop. I'm Chris Cooper, sitting in for Ann Northrop.
Hello, Chris. And we have a lot to talk about, and we are going to talk about all the Tuesday primary results. That's a significant story.
And for the first time, a federal appeals court has ruled that the sexual orientation discrimination is sex discrimination under the Fair Housing Act, as opposed to an EEOC ruling. So that's a big step forward for us.
And a Florida federal judge has ruled for the dignity of a transgender inmate in what is being called by the ACLU the most affirming decision ever for transgender people.
The openly gay Prime Minister of Ireland welcomed the Pope to his country, the first Pope to visit there in many, many years, and he raised LGBT issues directly to his face.
But the Pope was forced during his trip to focus on abuse by clergy and the cover-ups of the abuse by the bishops.
Meanwhile, wacko, crazy, right-wing Archbishop comes out of the woodwork to say, when did he know, and what did he know, and when did he know it? And say j'accuse to Pope Francis about how much he covered up a particular case of sex abuse in his, allegedly, his charges.
Indeed. They could get Benedict on the same thing, and John Paul II. St. John Paul II. And while church leaders turn on each other, the rats in the Trump crime family are also turning on each other.
There was a big dinner for LGBT bigots at the White House, and Ivanka posed smilingly with at least one of them.
Yes, they would call themselves evangelical moral leaders, but we don't see them that way. And we're going to look at the record of the late Senator John McCain, especially on LGBT issues.
The worst story of the week is a 9-year-old Colorado boy who took his own life when he came out and was bullied by his classmates.
Terrible story. And also a terrible story, or in this case an allegation. Opera star David Daniels and his husband are accused of raping a man in 2010.
And Andy will give you his review of Pretty Woman the musical. I will talk a little bit about Crazy Rich Asians and Black Klansmen.
Now, but let's start off by going to Florida, where we had this tremendous result in the gubernatorial primary, where Andrew Gilliam, who was the mayor of Tallahassee, Florida, the capital, it's only 181,000 people, but he ran as a big progressive, won the Democratic nomination in the three-way race.
He was backed by Bernie Sanders.
Yes. So, and he's very pro-gay.
Meanwhile,
no, just saying, when he was mayor. When some counties refused to issue marriage licenses to gay couples, he invited them to come to Tallahassee. He led the fight for domestic partner benefits there as a city council member. And he promises, of course, because Florida doesn't have it, statewide LGBT rights protections if he's elected. And he comes from a working class background, and he was the only candidate who wasn't a millionaire.
Well, meanwhile, Mr. Gilliam is African American, but meanwhile on Fox News, his Republican opponent, who I won't name, gets on Fox News and says, we shouldn't monkey this up, this election.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, really? And Fox News had to apologize for that, as they had to apologize for putting the picture of Patti LaBelle up when they were doing the memorial for Aretha Franklin.
But the candidate is the Republican isn't apologizing.
Oh no, Fox News apologized.
He's saying don't be silly.
Right.
Of course, I wasn't referring to his race. Well, that's what got Howard Cosell in trouble when he was calling a football game, and he said it was a black player, and he goes, "Look at that little monkey."
Oh.
He was suspended for that. I think we should say his name so people don't vote for him. His name is DeSantis. One of the things I love about Andrew Gilliam, the Democrat, is that he says Trump is devoid of any sense of morals.
I think that's accurate.
Okay. All right, where else are we going?
Well, there were a lot of other victories, Democratic victories, or rather gay and lesbian victories amongst the Democrats in primaries. So, for example, Kirsten Sinema in Arizona
She's an out bisexual.
Exactly, and she won the first bisexual to win the major party nomination
we got
to
her
the
picture
U.S. Senate.
somewhere. Yeah, she's running for Jeff Flake's seat. And back in Florida, there was one out lesbian and one closeted lesbian who won House nominations. Lauren Baer is out, and Donna Shalala, who used to be Clinton's HHS secretary, come on, Donna, what are you, like 80 years old? Come on. Let's go.
So anyway, the hope is that Lauren Baer will help flip the U.S. House of Representatives. And while we're still in Florida, we should mention that one of their state legislators, a guy named Chevron Jones, African-American, came out. He's 34 years old. He's been in the legislature reelected, I think, 3 or 4 times now.
Yeah.
And he finally decided it was time for him to start living his truth.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
He's the son of a preacher.
Yes, which makes it...
Of a mega church.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just some little storefront thing.
No, I'm telling you, in the black community, the church thing makes it sometimes very difficult on the gay thing. Thank God my dad was an atheist. That's all I have to say.
Thank God he was an atheist. Well, I guess that means... Well, let's get into some of these court cases that happened this week, because that's really big news for the community. They're all big, but the Seventh Circuit in Chicago affirmed that a lesbian who was discriminated against by a what do you call this? It's called the Glen St. Andrew Living Community for Old People.
Retirement home.
Yeah, she was sentenced that they ruled that she was subjected to illegal sex discrimination under the Fair Housing Act. This is the first time the Fair Housing Act has been interpreted by a federal court to say that sexual orientation discrimination is sex discrimination. And that's a big victory for Martha Wetzel, her name is.
And another interesting thing about it
the other thing I'm just going to say, the other thing is the facility can be, facility can be held liable for what the residents do to each other. You can't just say, hey, that's not on us. They were the ones who were harassing her, and nothing was done about it.
You just took the words right out of my mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. I thought you were going to go on to the next story. No. But that's good for bullying cases.
Yes.
Anyway, we of course have to worry about these things going to the Supreme Court and what they're going to do about it.
Right.
But we'll see. Okay. All right. Other legal cases. How about in Florida? The federal court there granted treatment to a trans woman in custody of the Department of Corrections, Rayan Keohane, had been denied hormone therapy and other treatments and they refused to let her dress or groom as a woman, and the ruling lets her transition in prison. And James Essex of the ACLU, it was their case, said this is the most affirming decision for trans people ever.
Wow.
That's what he said.
Well, back here in New York, there was a trans positive ruling for Sean Simonson, who worked for the Department of Social Services in Oswego County for years. And when he retired, he was born a woman but transitioning to a man,
right.
And they denied him his health benefits that he had earned through his service to the county for so long.
Well, they denied him transition-related health care, and now they say they're going to provide it going forward to everybody, but they're not giving him damage, or is it him, I guess, damages, but it was settled with Lambda Legal Defense.
Yeah, so at least going forward, people are going to get their coverage.
But on the other hand, 16 states are urging the Supreme Court to overturn a federal appeals court ruling that Michigan funeral home we talked to you about that discriminated against a transgender employee. They're saying this isn't sex discrimination. That's not what Congress intended in '64. So the states opposing us here are Texas, Alabama, Kansas,
Maine,
Utah,
LePage.
Nebraska, Maine, LePage, and then the Republican.
LePage is the governor of Maine, and he's a little bit not so cuckoo.
Well, but he can't run again, and the Republican who's nominated for governor won't repudiate what he's doing in this case, and so the Democrats are going after him, and the guy goes, well, I'm not going to take this into consideration when I do hiring. And they said, you can't. We have a law in Maine that says you can't discriminate.
Well, it's hard to parse this a little bit because they are making the argument that, oh, we're not necessarily against gay rights. It's that we don't want the federal authority over-interpreted and broadened in this manner.
Look, we've gone over this again and again and again, and actually in transgender cases, there seems to be even more receptivity to understanding it as sex discrimination. The only reason you are making a distinction between this gay couple or this trans person is because of their gender.
And more importantly, the only reason why we have to interpret these laws in such an inclusive, expansive way is because we can't get legislation on this that we should have had decades ago.
Yes, we should have.
Yeah, there's no federal legislation. If any of your friends say to you, oh, you know, there's protections for gay and lesbian people, because I have tons of people who say that to me. I once was at work, and we were having our training for, you know, non-harassment, and they said, oh, and gay people are protected by federal law. And I had to go, excuse me.
Well, the federal courts are more and more ruling in this way.
But only by interpreting expansively.
And I very much worry about that when it goes to the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Unless it goes tomorrow.
Well, and one of the points is that if it goes to the Supreme Court, the Justice Department apparently has to allow the agencies to take a stand in court. For example, if the fair housing, apparently the judge, if it goes to the Supreme Court, the Justice Department has to give it the green light.
Really?
Yeah, and this Justice Department.
I learned so much from watching this show. That's good, because I'm sure.
No, that's bad.
I thought you said that the fair housing can defend. They can defend.
No, if the Justice Department gives them the green light. Is this Justice Department going to give them the green light?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
They're not going to.
Yeah.
That's bad.
That's bad.
All right, let's wake up. All right, normally we would talk about this in international news, but there's a big story around the Pope this week.
I'm going to let Andy run with this because he's our resident Catholicism expert. I'm just going to sit back, eat popcorn, and watch the fireworks.
I have been an atheist much longer than I was a Catholic. All right, but you certainly know the lay of the land. So the Pope is going there for the World Meeting of Families, which was originally founded as a right-wing institution, but they're trying to open it up a bit. So he's greeted by the Prime Minister, who was an out gay man, Leo Varadkar, who promised to raise gay issues, but he kind of did it obliquely. He said in front of the Pope, "We voted in our parliament and by referendum to modernize our laws." There's Leo Varadkar on there on the right with the Pope Francis in the photo. And he was referring, of course, to same-sex marriage and abortion.
Right.
He also said that families come in many different wonderful forms, including same-sex parents. And Tiernan Brady, who we had on the show, was the big activist over there. He called it a fantastic moment. We're wonderfully blasé about having a gay prime minister over here. And then he met with the Pope also met with the President of Ireland, which is a ceremonial office, but this guy, Michael Higgins, is terrific. And he brought up directly how Ireland has advanced on sexual orientation and gender identity issues.
So here's where things get interesting, because while the Pope was over there, there's this...
And having to apologize for abuse abjectly because of the the Pennsylvania report.
The Pennsylvania report, and also the long history in Ireland.
Yes.
So while the Pope is over there trying to hold it together in the face of all these allegations, this Archbishop Vigano,
yes,
who is the guy who put Kim Davis next to the Pope and got himself fired as a result of that little stunt.
Well, he got in trouble before, and he was made papal nuncio in the United States to get him out of the Vatican. He's a Vatican climber who I think thought he could be Pope someday. He's very right-wing, and he hates gay people. He thinks we're the source of all the problems in the church.
So he puts out this letter that gets sent specifically to the most right-wing branches of the Catholic press that charges that Pope Francis knew that Cardinal McCarrick, who has been charged with sexually abusing various seminarians.
And has been suspended now.
Exactly. But
he's elderly,
But charging that Pope Francis knew well in advance of those charges and that action and covered it up and did nothing. And that therefore Pope Francis must resign.
So I have a couple of questions for Archbishop Vigano. If you knew about this 5 or 6 years ago, what did you do about it? Why didn't you speak up? If the Pope wasn't doing anything, why didn't you speak up publicly then to prevent more abuse from happening? And Vigano was also guilty when he was papal nuncio in America. He's sort of the Vatican ambassador here. He covered up or ignored the abuse by the Minnesota Archbishop because that was a right-wing friend, and he didn't want to go after him. So you know.
I gotta confess, I have a strong antipathy towards the Catholic hierarchy.
Well, they have an antipathy towards you.
Well, that
and me
and our long
and all of you out there,
and our long history of battling them politically here in New York State.
Yes.
I mean, you know, New York State, which has a reputation for being extremely liberal, for the reason why for so long we did not have basic civil rights protections for lesbians and gay people, and still don't have them for transgender people, is because the Catholic Church wields unholy political influence in the
Yes.
state, and they used it to block those basic civil rights protections. So that,
yeah, I don't
let
like
alone
to, I don't like
marriage.
to say anything nice about Andrew Cuomo, but he did do an executive order on transgender rights. So
Yes.
as long as he's governor or Cynthia Nixon is governor, it's going to be okay.
Yes. But anyway, the point is I have a strong antipathy towards the hierarchy, not towards Catholic people, but towards the hierarchy. And this going on, this infighting, I'm just sitting back
Yes.
and enjoying the show.
Popcorn. Break out your popcorn.
Yep.
Well, now also on the plane coming home, Francis was asked what a parent should do if they got a gay child. That's and he said there's a lot that can be done through psychiatry. But he said don't throw them out of the family, don't condemn them, let them express themselves. It's double talk. It's double talk because the church keeps saying this is a sin that will send you to hell forever, and until they retreat from that and say we're wrong about that. You're also wrong about women priests and governance. Look, I keep saying the Catholic Church is not going to solve its problems with abuse or anything else until it is governed from below, like most denominations, where the people hire their own priests in the parish, right? That's what most Protestants do, right? And they elect their own bishops. But if they keep saying, oh God, please send us somebody better for this terrible position, you're going to still have this nonsense going on.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Well, then you might as well resign yourself to the abuse. Okay.
All right. Anything else on the Pope's
on
trip?
the Pope, I think that's quite enough about the
think
Pope.
so, too.
Let's talk about Trump. The Trump crime family is collapsing. So you had the Michael Cohen, and then the CFO of Trump and Company, Alan Weisselberg,
Paul Manafort,
who was turning state's evidence, right? But the great thing that's going on right now is that the Manhattan DA, district attorney, and the state attorney general have cases against the Trump crime family now. These are things that Trump cannot pardon. He actually would have a great deal of difficulty interfering even in the Manafort case and the Cohen case, because the Cohen case, because it's in New York, and it's out of the reach of him being able to just fire somebody who can stop the case in that case.
Oh, that's
Anyway,
good.
So good.
Meanwhile, at the White House,
Yes.
Well, there was a big meeting of evangelicals, a big dinner where Trump got in front of them and said, oh, you guys have done so much for me, but, I've also given you everything you wanted.
It's true.
And it's true. It's 100% true.
And he knows it, and that's why his base is so solid.
Yep.
But attending this fest was Pastor Jim Garlow? Yeah, there he is.
Jim Harlow, isn't it?
No, it's Garlow.
Okay.
I wrote Harlow when I read it. It's Garlow of San Diego. He promised to go to jail if same-sex marriage passed, but he seems to be out now. And he also said Satan was obsessed with destroying marriage. Trump has had 3, of course, so he's doing a pretty good job of it. He said pastors should act like Bonhoeffer against Hitler.
Oh, Lord.
So that's violent talk, but it's actually the president to this gathering, and this has been widely reported, said, and there's no tape of this, but he said violence will follow if Democrats get elected in the fall. He said because they're controlled by Antifa. Well.
All right. Well, while we're talking about federal stuff, should we talk about the passing of John McCain?
Yes, we should.
All right.
We should talk about that. It's were doing it while services are taking place for him. He was a very conservative Republican.
Right.
He voted with the president 83% of the time.
A lot to admire about the guy in his personal fortitude and history.
Here's my theory about why people like him. Mainly because he seemed like a human being. He talked to the press relentlessly. He answered their questions relatively candidly, and just all that access was something we're sort of unused to in politicians, and that's why he had things like the Straight Talk Express. But the things he did, he was quite the warmonger. Not only was he dropping bombs on everybody, and volunteered for that, but every single war he wanted it to be bigger, practically, that we've ever been in.
Well, maybe his biggest crime was inflicting Sarah Palin on the nation.
Yes, he was. And that was Steve Schmidt's idea. Steve Schmidt, who has left the Republican Party now, he was the campaign manager, and he wanted Sarah Palin as a sort of a Hail Mary pass because they were going to lose, and for 5 minutes they were ahead in the polls.
Yeah, for 5 minutes it worked, and then she opened her mouth and it was over.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he was pretty much against us, though he was a little bit of a moving target, moving slowly in our direction.
Yes, he mostly voted against us.
Yeah,
yes.
though he voted against the exclusion, or Trump's attempt to exclude transgender troops.
Yeah, he came around on that, and he did vote for the Employment Non-Discrimination Act in 2013. And he voted against using the Defense Authorization Act to advance discrimination, and he did urge a veto of the Arizona License to Discriminate bill, which was vetoed by the far-right Governor Jan Brewer. Remember all that?
Yep.
And it was basically a business thing, where the business people said, don't turn this state into a complete right-wing bastion. We're very conservative. Don't do that. Okay.
So, one side note on the whole McCain issue is that now that he's died, the question is, who is the Republican governor of Arizona going to choose to replace him for the next 2 years? And one of the names that has been floated is Cindy McCain.
Who's she?
Well, that would be his wife, his widow. And what makes that interesting is that she and McCain's daughter, Meghan McCain, appeared together in a No on 8 campaign.
Yes, no hate.
No hate, exactly. I think they had it tattooed on their cheek or was it across their lips?
Across their mouth, yeah.
And so, she's expressed in the past, some pro-gay views.
Well, that would be a nice, if you pardon the expression, F you to Trump if they did that, but I don't know if the governor has it in him.
We'll see. I mean, it's probably the best outcome we can expect from a Republican governor of Arizona.
Yeah, yeah.
So, fingers crossed.
Okay. Well, yes, if you have to deal with an interim appointment. In other political news, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, endorsed Andrew Cuomo over bisexual Cynthia Nixon. But you probably, I don't know if you watch television. Maybe you do.
So, occasionally.
A little bit? Okay. Have you seen these ads that Cuomo and his running mate, Kathy Hochul, a former congresswoman, are running? They're linking Cynthia with her running mate, Jumaane Williams, who is this basically radical grassroots, tenant activist who works for the poor, who took a long time to come around on LGBT, on same-sex marriage, and on abortion. But he did. So they're running these ads saying, she's running with a conservative who opposes a woman's right to choose and opposes the right to marry. Well, he's changed his mind on that. He has. And he never really worked against our rights, ever. But Andrew Cuomo didn't support same-sex marriage in the beginning. Kathy Hochul only had an 80% rating from HRC herself. It is disgusting.
The first time I saw those ads, it almost made me decide then and there to vote for Cynthia Nixon.
And Jumaane Williams.
And we get to vote separately in the state, don't we, for lieutenant governor and
Yes, you
governor.
do, and then they have to run as a ticket in the fall. It's crazy. It has stuck some people. I mean, Jumaane Williams could win and have to run with Andrew Cuomo.
That's what I'm chuckling at. That's what I'm chuckling at.
He wouldn't be given much to do in the administration.
Well,
His
like
father,
Kathy Hochul has much to do in the administration?
I don't know.
Lieutenant governors do nada.
Well, we don't have time to go into all the stories that I can tell about that, which has happened in the past. Now, here's a little dicey. Oh, and by the way, I think Andrew Cuomo probably crapped himself when he saw this Andrew Gilliam win in Florida. I mean, Andrew Gilliam in Florida won the gubernatorial nomination, came out of nowhere. He was at 16% in the polls. He had no money. You know, sounds like Cynthia Nixon. Anyway. All right, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, speaking of them, they had to fire the head of their foundation, Mary Beth Maxwell, who's a labor leader, out lesbian. She was up for labor secretary at one point because she was telling a story in the office about some assault or something like that, and she kept using the N-word. Now, she was describing language that was being used in this fracas or something, but she wouldn't stop saying it, so they said, you gotta go.
Wow.
She's out.
Wow.
As a result, Chad Griffin said the context doesn't matter. So that's why we don't, anyway, in North Carolina, a federal court struck down the congressional map again, and they have to redraw it by the election. That's what they said. And if they go to the Supreme Court's 4-4 right now, so that means whatever they did at the lower court ought to stand. All right, we're done with that? Okay. All right, so we go into what's going on in the states and things and cities around the country. What do you got?
Sure. Well, no, we already talked about the states going to the Supreme Court asking them to repeal our rights.
Not very nice.
No, but the Democratic National Committee has actually come out reaffirming its support for LGBTQ people.
In a big way. They are now... they've updated their bylaws to say that on gender inclusion, to include people who are gender non-conforming. Before, if you were a caucus goer, you had to declare yourself as a male or a female because they had to balance. You know, they had to have a certain amount of balance.
Gotcha.
Now they're saying if you're non-conforming, go ahead and say so. You're free to express yourself. And they also passed a resolution condemning discrimination versus LGBT people in the name of religious freedom.
Which is very important because that's the big wedge these days that they're using to try to roll back our rights. Well, shall we go to the opera singer?
Where are we in our list here? Well, maybe let's hold off on. We could if you want. It's among the crime stories. Sure, go ahead.
All right. Well, there's a young baritone singer, and
well, first of all, let's talk about who are we considering here?
All right,
David Daniels is the most famous countertenor in the world.
Now, countertenor means you sing really high, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And he's married to Scott Walters, who's a conductor. And they were married by Ruth Bader Ginsburg because she's a big opera fan. That's David on the right and Scott Walters on the left. So
along comes this guy.
Samuel Schultz.
Exactly, Samuel Schultz.
Got a picture of him.
A young baritone who says that in 2010, that couple,
when he was 23,
drugged him and raped him, and he woke up in a strange bed with no clothes on, and these two come walking back in and say, "Oh, don't worry about the barebacking because I'm negative." This is the allegation, and it is explosive.
And he says he did it because he saw that David was given tenure at the University of Michigan, and he said, "I want to protect."
You're saying Samuel Schultz did it?
Yes, came forward
with the accusations.
Oh yeah, not the rape. Yeah. Samuel Schultz came forward because he was concerned about him working with young people, and so. There's no physical evidence of this. He didn't go to the police or anything at the time.
Right.
He talked to friends. He talked to a psychiatrist. They all confirmed that he talked to them at the time. Everybody's being investigated. David Daniels denies it.
Right, as does Scott Walters. They both say no way.
It's a
mess.
Yeah, and then Rose McGowan, who is the partner of Rain Dove and a Weinstein accuser, says now as allies to the victim and voyeurs of an event, we should find a better way to balance support of the victim with due process for the accused. She's talking about the case at NYU, and so we're all learning about this, and now they're saying there should be more due process in these, because for a while there it was like an accusation, goodbye, and so everybody deserves due process. We believe in that. we should as Americans. All right, should we do this terrible story in Denver?
Yeah.
This is about a 9-year-old Jamel Miles who killed himself after being bullied. We have a video report if we can run it.
This pizzeria
This is my son's favorite place to go.
is special for Leah Pierce and her family, but now they're visiting it with a hole in their hearts.
He was my sunshine because he was my only son.
9-year-old Jamel Miles started 4th grade at Joe Shoemaker's school on Monday, weeks before he had the courage to tell his mom this.
He looked so scared when he told me. He was like, "Mom, I'm gay." And I thought he was playing, and I looked back at him because I was driving, and he was just curled up like this. So scared, and I just looked at him, I was like, "I still love you." He went to school and he said he was going to tell people he's gay because he's proud of himself.
But on Thursday, heartbreak. Pierce found her son dead in their Denver home. She says he killed himself after being bullied.
4 days is all it took at school. I could just imagine what they said to him. My son told my oldest daughter, the kids at school told him to kill himself. I'm just sad he didn't come to me.
A psychologist rather said that he was proud of himself and he expected others to be as well. Now, some people have said to me, "Oh, how could a 9-year-old know what he was?" Well, we knew, right?
Yeah, I knew when I was that
We knew
age.
we were
I knew I was
different.
younger than
we
that
knew we
age.
were different for sure, and it's a heartbreaking story. And not enough is being done about bullying in the schools, anywhere practically, although some schools are. And then we have the case of Dr. Thomas Frieden. He was the health commissioner in New York under Bloomberg, and he was head of the CDC under President Obama. Yep. He was arrested for groping a woman in his apartment in 2017, charged with forcible touching, third-degree sexual abuse, and harassment. She says he groped her while their spouses weren't looking at a party, and he was arrested for it. This was a guy who was right in the midst of the AIDS crisis back in the day, and we had him on the show here, and it's, well, there it is. Okay, all right, crime. Let's talk about what's happened in Albuquerque, where 100+ LGBTQ migrants of color provided support as 6 LGBTQ leaders and immigrants' rights leaders engaged in direct action demanding that ICE be abolished, that deportations be stopped and detention ended. They shut down traffic for 3 hours. They're part of a national campaign in memory of Roxana Hernandez, who died in custody, the transgender woman, in this year.
Meanwhile, in California, Governor Brown has signed a bill into law that supports LGBTQ seniors. Specifically,
Hooray!
It adds sexual orientation and gender identity to their elderly communities law. And so, you know, I don't imagine it changes a lot for, you know, in California, they're already so liberal
Well,
on
you'd be
these issues.
surprised. I mean, consciousness needs to be raised. We get bad stories out of California, too. It may be against the law, but they happen.
Yeah, so it's a good reaffirmation. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. In the Bronx, in 1997, a trans woman was strangled to death, Amanda White, 20, and 2 men were arrested this week because they found DNA on the cord that was used to kill her. And the 2 guys were charged with murder for this, and both of them have pretty long rap sheets.
In Utah, a lesbian was declared married to her late partner.
Yeah, they have like retroactive marriage there. I don't completely understand it.
Yeah, apparently, it's the second post-mortem same-sex marriage in Utah.
And they do it for straight people too.
Well,
These 2 were together for 50 years.
Right, but this is the second one for same-sex, for
Yes.
a same-sex couple in Utah.
Yes.
The woman's name is Bonnie Forster, and her late wife was Beverly Grossin, and
Yes.
they'd lived together for 50 years. As you
Yes.
said, I think they started off here in New York, actually.
Yes, that's where I think they met here in New York,
Yeah.
but they stayed in Utah. In Charleston, South Carolina, a trans woman, Kendra Martinez, was brutally assaulted walking to her car, beaten unconscious on August 19th. There's pictures. Her sister saw the attack and gave the police a description of the suspect. They are not treating it as a hate crime. In Orlando, the first government building in Florida to have an all-user bathroom is City Hall. It's going to accommodate trans people and those with disabilities.
I'm still back in Utah, where Librarians are fighting back against censorship. In the, I want to make sure I get this right, the Washington County Library System, specifically the Hurricane Branch, they were wearing buttons that promoted sort of the different LGBTQ books that you could find for Pride Month.
Yeah.
And the director, he's the villain of this piece, Joel Tucker, came down on them and said, no, you got to take those off. You can't wear those buttons. You're taking sides, he
Taking
said.
sides about what? About the existence of books?
About paper dedicated to gay people, apparently.
I remember going to the Baldwin Public Library where I grew up, and I was obviously most of the books about gay stuff in the '60s were terrible. I mean, it was we were sick, but there were a couple of novels on the shelves, and I was able to take those out and educate myself a little bit about what gay people did and how they lived.
Well, these librarians were very smart. They took their complaint to the press. To the local press. God bless the local press where it still exists.
Yes.
No, seriously,
Yes, I know.
it's a hard thing. So, but they took it to the local press, which picked it up, and then it got picked up from the local press into bigger Utah venues. And as a result, there was pushback against there's no happy resolution here. It's more a matter of, well, we got to see what happens next Pride Month. And what. The point is,
every month should be Pride Month.
This director guy, Joel Tucker, is not schooled in library science. And the library associations are all coming in and saying, look, this is about freedom of information, about making sure people
of course,
have all kinds of access to.
There were also books that you had to ask for at the desk, right, that weren't on the shelves in the old days, too. And that's a big controversy in places. In California, the State Board of Ed is slowly rolling out textbooks inclusive of LGBT history, speaking of books. They approved this in November, but the schools...
A year ago.
The schools are dragging their feet, and there's opposition in many districts.
Well, it seems to be a combination of things. It's from how I interpreted the story, that there is opposition on the ground in some districts, but in other districts it's money. They don't buy textbooks necessarily all that often. We all know how strapped so many districts are.
And how expensive textbooks are.
So, gradually, hopefully, as they do replace their textbooks, they'll replace them with these now approved LGBT inclusive history books.
I mean, I just got finished doing a big story in the Gay City News, which I'll try to link to in our email or send out at some point, about how New York City is making progress because we had a bullying incident that ended in death for the bullied kid, Abel Cedeno, struck back, protected himself with a knife, ended up killing one kid and slashing another. And that trial is still going on. It's making very slow progress. But the schools all of a sudden invested millions more dollars. Now, of course, millions more dollars in New York. I mean, there are 1.1 million students. And I went to a forum on this, and the guy who's the gay liaison for the Department of Education said, "Well, we've got a brochure now, and we're going to table with it." I said, "Table with it? It needs to be in the hands of every single student in the school system, so that they know what their rights are, that they can complain about bullying, that they can get something done about it, and that they can transfer out of the school." This is what a lot of kids don't know. If you're being bullied, if you apply for a transfer, they have to give it to you.
I didn't know that.
Yes, maybe it's new.
I don't have kids.
Maybe it's new. Abel Cedeno didn't know it. He just kept getting bullied in the same school. So anyway, all right.
All right.
We did that. We did Chevron Jones.
Well, while we're talking about California, their lawmakers are putting a big red highlight around the fact that Betsy DeVos is failing trans students in particular. It seems that the department has rejected, I think, 5 cases of complaints of harassment,
yes.
And they're just refusing to address them and deal with them.
Well, they're just not going to. I mean, Jeff Sessions, if he is still Attorney General by the time of this viewing, he always says, the law says we don't have to do that, and we're not doing it. It's not explicit about it, so we're not doing it. Actually,
but that's the Justice Department. Betsy DeVos is the Department of Education.
Actually, transgender people are included in the hate crimes law, and he knows that, and he actually will investigate it as a hate crime if a transgender person is a victim of a hate crime. Because that was one place, you said we don't have any rights from federal law. That is one place where we're written into it.
Yeah, that's true.
That is true. All right. Here's somebody I never heard of who was written up in the Times for dying at the age of 95. Reverend Robert Wood. We have an old picture of him here. He's from the United Church of Christ. He urged accepting gay people in a book in 1960. He said, I felt this way. I felt I should write it. I tried to get somebody more knowledgeable to write it, but nobody would write it. He cashed in an insurance policy in order to fund paying for the book. Well, I mean, and it was called Christ and the Homosexual, and he argued for full acceptance of gay people. Now, he eventually came out himself. 1986. Well, it's a long time ago, but it wasn't 1960. But who was coming out in 1960? You could count them on one hand. We have 17 minutes and 43 seconds. Okay, thank you. All right. So, so Robert Wood, a pioneer, writing that book in 1960. God bless you.
All right, international news?
I want to say the California passed a resolution condemning unnecessary surgery on intersex children.
Oh.
Yes, okay, international. Go ahead.
All right, well, Australia has a new prime minister, and he's conservative.
Malcolm Turnbull, it was a leadership fight, so they had an inter-party thing, and who's the new guy?
The new guy is Scott Morrison, and he is, I believe, attends a Pentecostal Sydney Evangelical Church.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. And he also opposed the same-sex marriage law.
He's very big on religious liberty. He is outspoken when there was this anti-gay rugby player, Israel Folau, he defended him. Yeah. And he's a big hardliner on immigration.
He praised the rugby player who said, the rugby player said that gay people would go to hell unless they repent their sins. And Morrison's response, the prime minister, he wasn't prime minister then, but his response was, he praised that rugby player's strength of character in just standing up for what he believes in.
Good grief.
Yeah, so Australia, we have our fingers crossed that you weather this.
Here's an update on Bermuda, if you're planning a vacation. They reverted to domestic partnerships even though they had same-sex marriage under a court order, right? And then a court ruled, you can't do that. You got to give marriage. And the government has appealed that to the Court of Appeals. So here's what they do in Bermuda. Foreign judges fly in to hear the case on appeal November 7th through the 9th. If the government loses, they still have an appeal to the United Kingdom's Privy Council,
where things look dim for our opponents. Meanwhile,
but they want to do everything they can to protect marriage.
Well, while we're talking about the Commonwealth, in Northern Ireland, several thousand people marched.
Well, that's part of the United Kingdom.
Yes, but Bermuda is part of the Commonwealth.
Yes,
indeed. Okay. So I said, we're talking about the Commonwealth.
All right. Okay. I just don't want you to put.
I'm trying to do a transition here.
Okay.
Okay. So segue, thank you. In Derry, in Northern Ireland, their second largest city, they had a great gay pride parade, their 25th anniversary pride celebration. Thousands of people turned out, apparently. Yeah. And they always march along the ancient civil rights routes that they did 50 years ago.
Yes, they did. And they were led by Bernadette McCalliskey and Eamon McCann, because there's no same-sex marriage in Northern Ireland.
That is the one part of the UK that does not have it.
And Sinn Féin, the more radical party in Northern Ireland, is attacking the UK government. See, right now, essentially, there is no government in Northern Ireland because they can't form a government because there's too much fraction. So, but the UK can make laws for Northern Ireland in the absence of laws from the Northern Ireland Assembly, and they won't do it because Theresa May is being propped up by 10 members of the Democratic Unionist Party, which is the right-wing Protestant party over there. It's the Protestants who are hurting us over there, not the Catholics. All right.
All right. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, a woman has filed suit to have her civil partnership recognized. She's not challenging the marriage laws just yet.
Yes.
But she says...
This is unprecedented.
Exactly. And it could backfire, or it could be the step they need.
Yeah, one of the leading gay litigators said it's too soon for this case. But, in July, a female expat did get the Court of Final Appeal there to recognize same-sex marriages and civil partnerships from overseas for purposes of granting dependent visas.
There you go.
So they've made some progress.
Yeah, they're seeing that as the possible opening to maybe allow this to happen.
In Nigeria, police raided a hotel and arrested 57 men on suspicion of having gay sex. They were at a birthday party. Some of them weren't even gay. There were women there who were not gay as well. They face up to 14 years in prison because they're suspected of maybe having had gay sex during this birthday party at a hotel.
Well,
and wait a minute, I got another Nigeria story.
Okay. Oh, is this the president?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you do it.
His name is, he's guy running for president next, they're all running next year. His name is Donald Duke, one of 10 candidates. He says he will decriminalize homosexuality and he would have a gay person in his cabinet as long as they don't talk about it. And that's the thing. He says, this guy is a former governor of a state in South Nigeria. He says he wants us to be discreet, but I have to say, it's a start for him to say these things.
No, it is. It's very much a start.
When Britain 50 years ago decriminalized sodomy, homosexuality, you were still not allowed to make any public displays of affection. You could only do it in your home when no one else was in the house.
Have you ever been to Africa?
I have not. Have you?
I was in Kenya and Tanzania, and I was very careful not to let anyone know I was gay while I was there. I basically put myself back into the closet while I was there.
There are neighborhoods in New York where I'm that way.
Well, no, but I did finally, my guide in Kenya, I finally came out to, somehow it came up in discussion. He must have asked me, are you married or whatever? I said, no, I'm gay. It was fine. He was, a liberal-minded Kenyan, but it's really dicey over there. You have to be very careful in Africa. It's a conservative society, and also a lot of those societies are saddled with the colonial laws still. Where the colonizers have moved on. Unfortunately, their legacy continues.
And that gets to what's the nature of homophobia? Where does it come from? I mean, is it something inside people that they're just rebelling against difference in this way for some biological? I don't know. I mean, I think it's it's very complex. Very complex. In Guatemala, a bill forbidding marriage equality is on the move in the legislature.
The problem with this bill is that it runs afoul of the ruling by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which is binding on Guatemala, that says that for all of the Americas, you got to have same-sex marriage.
Well, see, I think what a lot of these legislators do is that they do everything they can to stop us, even though the courts are going to go the other way, so that when they have to appear before the voters, I tried to save you, but I couldn't do it. Yeah. And in Taiwan, sadly, they have this new referendum procedure, so it looks like the opposition to same-sex marriage, before they even have it, has enough signatures to get this on the ballot in Taiwan.
Well, the good news is that our side is also organizing its own referendum measure.
What's ours going to say?
I don't know. I don't know the specifics of ours, but I know they're organizing. So Taiwan seems to be in this strange, because you always see the protests from Taiwan, and tens of thousands come out against same-sex marriage, and then the next day there's a protest, and tens of thousands come out in favor of same-sex marriage. So they seem to be a society that's really split down the middle on this issue.
Right. So. In Istanbul, sad, horrible story, trans woman, Esra, A-T-E-S, her name was 40 years old, was murdered. Police, we have a picture. Police have arrested suspects. This woman was also attacked a few days before the murder. And in Paris last week, Vanessa Campos, a migrant trans woman and sex worker, was murdered. So these horrors continue. In Guadalajara, Mexico, they changed the law to allow sexual relations in public. Did you read about this? Unless there's a complaint from somebody, if you're off in the woods having sex, it's okay. And this is a pretty conservative country. They said basically police have better things to do than to go into the woods to find people who are having sex, or into the Ramble in Central Park.
That's old. I bird the Ramble, and you never see that anymore.
You don't see that anymore, huh?
No.
Anyway, and in Amsterdam, there's a park there that has allowed sex in the open air for over a decade. The only rules are keep the area clean, not too much noise, and don't do it in dedicated child zones. But I've often said, a lot of people, one of the things they said in Guadalajara is a lot of people can't afford a hotel, and they meet, they want to do something. Why can't they go off in the woods if they're not in front of anybody and everything and do it outside? What the hell?
There you go.
Just don't frighten the horses. All right. So we move to entertainment news?
Yeah, neither of us has any AIDS news this week. I wish I could say that's because AIDS is over, but it's not.
No.
But
as Peter Staley said this week, AIDS over. He said there's 35 million people who are infected with the virus, and 35 million have already died. So it is far from over.
Yep. But start with your review of Pretty Woman.
I have a very brief review of Pretty Woman, the musical. Compared to my review last week of Getting the Band Back Together, this is My Fair Lady. But it doesn't add anything to the Richard Gere, Julia Roberts movie. It's got Jerry Mitchell doing the choreography, and he's terrific, right? But you're sitting there, and I like the movie pretty much, right? And this is a real throwback to the '80s, where the styles were horrendously ugly. I wish I had a picture of it. But the show seems to be doing well, but I don't think they added anything to the property.
Okay.
And that's,
There you go.
All right.
Well, I have to apologize because I didn't even think of this until just this moment. Last weekend, I was at FlameCon, the largest gay, lesbian, transsexual, bisexual, transgender comic book con in possibly the world, certainly in the country.
Did you have a nice time?
It was here in New York. I go every year, and I have these fabulous photos of the various gender-switching superhero costumes that they did.
Well, show some of them.
Well, I didn't think of it until
Pull your
just
phone
a
out and
second.
get them on here. Will you send them to us so we can show them next week?
I will do that. But anyway, keep FlameCon in your mind for next year if you're going to be in New York. It's usually at the end of July, beginning of August, and it's a lot of fun. It's very much a lot of fun.
Did you dress up?
I did not. Maybe I'll do it next year. We'll see.
Have you ever dressed up?
I have never dressed up for FlameCon.
I don't dress up for Halloween anymore.
I dress up for Halloween every year. But
I dress up for this show. I don't wear a jacket and tie other than for this show.
Well, I should dress up for FlameCon. Anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about the movie Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah.
Which is, it's silly, simple fun. It's easy to digest. What I like about it is the fact that it does not feel the need to have white leads, which is so unusual these days.
Are there any white people in it?
I can't recall a single one. It's entirely Asians. It's sort of like the experience of going to see Black Panther when that movie was, tearing up the box office. And this movie is tearing up the box office too. Yeah. And it's a wonderful message. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to go see it was to support that idea and the fact that, yes, Hollywood, you can make money by showing stories of people other than white people. And white people will be interested in these stories too.
That's why we went to see The Boys in the Band in 1970, because it was going to be all gay people.
Yeah, so...
And most of the actors were gay too, although not out in those days, most of them.
Well, so
Cliff Gorman wasn't gay.
Crazy Rich
Larry
Asians...
Luckenbill.
I see.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Crazy Rich Asians has two gay characters, and this is where the movie, I think, fails a little bit. Oh. I mean, they're positive characters, but, they're in supporting roles, all right, not surprising, because this is a romantic comedy about, these two people meeting, will they get married, will they, won't they? So it's supporting roles, but they're incredibly stereotypical. And even worse, they're eunuchs. And that was particularly disturbing to me because of what has been done to Asians, particularly Asian males, in cinema for so long. They are always portrayed as eunuchs. So here's a movie where the Asian guys are hot and they're the sexual leads.
But the gay ones aren't.
But the gay ones have no relationships. They're
Well, there was The Wedding Banquet, which was a biracial couple, where the guy was pretty good looking.
Yeah. But so that I would say
many years ago, The Wedding Banquet by Ang Lee.
Yes.
Yeah.
But while I appreciate that Crazy Rich Asians included us, I wish it was in a less stereotypical manner.
Well, Pretty Woman had a gay stereotype in it. I mean, My Fair Lady, which I just referenced, had a gay stereotype in it, which wasn't even written.
Which one was that?
Zoltan, the guy who tries to smoke Eliza out and find out who she is at the ball.
Right.
They have him swishing down the stairs. It's very offensive.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, there are times to cast stereotypical gay characters. They have a role to play, etc., but not gratuitously. Not just to get a cheap laugh out of the audience.
Well, anyway, check out Crazy Rich Asians if you're in the mood for something light and fun. Just keep in mind that, we're there. but we're kind of there the way we're always there.
And we'd appreciate a time cue from the office, from the control room if you have it.
And finally, Black Klansman, go see it. Spike Lee, about a black guy who infiltrated the Klan, and it was amazing. It was fun. It was moving. It's an excellent, excellent movie. I can't recommend Black Klansman highly enough if you haven't seen it already.
Okay, I have not, and I do want to see it, and now I will, because Chris Cooper. And where can we read Chris Cooper's movie reviews? Our sacrificial moviegoer.
You can read them at cfcooper.net.
cfcooper.net. That's always in our email. And if you'd like to be on our email list, all you have to do is go to gayusatv.org, and you can sign up right there online for our weekly email, which gives you program notes like the one I'm going to give you now, because free speech is going. Not all of you see us on Free Speech TV, but they're going into pledge mode from September 6th to September 30th. So during that period, Gay USA will premiere on Fridays at 8:30 p.m. and repeat on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Regularly scheduled programming will resume on October the 1st. Okay. Guy Pearce this week, you know the actor Guy Pearce, right? He did Time Machine,
Sure.
and many movies. He waded into the casting debate over who should play which roles. You know, about whether a transgender actor has to play a transgender role, gay play gay.
Sure,
and,
this, this came up with, what's her name, who plays Black Widow? Scarlett Johansson.
Yes, and Scarlett Johansson, apparently the highest paid actress in the world,
Can
pulled
I-
out. Yes.
because, and Ann said because she does the superhero movies. And can I just be the counterbalance to Ann?
Yes.
I know there's a glut of superhero movies, and some of them, particularly the DC ones, tend not to be that good. But there are some really great ones, and I am a fan of the superhero genre. So don't listen to Ann. Go ahead.
Well, I certainly grew up with that. I mean, Batman and Robin and Superman helped me with my gayness.
Well,
right?
and full disclosure, I used to work at Marvel Comics, so I may be a little bit biased. Go
Okay,
on.
well, or you might be biased for, you might be biased against. But let's finish up with Guy Pearce.
Yes.
Guy Pearce, remember he played a drag queen in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Sure.
And caught some flack for that. But he's saying now, in terms of acting, he says people take offense too easily to saying, well, I could play that role, and he says he knows he's going to get flack for this, but he thinks that anybody should be able to play anything, and I basically agree with that. Anybody should be able, although I don't think I would try to play an African American character. I don't think. Although, what was that?
Robert Downey Jr. did it in
Yes.
Sound of Thunder or something like that.
Yes, and then there was that crazy movie by the people who did. Oh my God! You shouldn't bring something up, Andy, if you can't remember what it is. Where all those actors were playing men and women, and Hugh Grant and Jim Broadbent and all these people. It'll come to us. But everybody played everybody. Everybody played men, women. Everybody played about 5 different characters in the course of the movie. I forget what the name of it was. You'll tell me.
Oh,
You do remember.
Was this the Cloud Atlas?
Yes, yes. What did you think of that?
Left me cold.
We're out of time. It's been great having you, Chris Cooper.
Oh,
and we're
glad
not
to
going to
be here,
resolve
Andy.
the casting debate. We'll see you next week.
And we'll be back.
I think Ann will be back next week.
She'll be back.
Yeah, and I think Mitchell Gold is going to join us.
All right.
Okay.